Hey, I'm Stuart, founder of DMARC Defender. In today's video, we're going to be talking about DMARC reports. So for the rest of this video, first we're going to talk about why DMARC reports exist. We're going to talk about how they're generated. Then we're going to go through the contents of a DMARC report. And then we're going to talk about how you set them up if you don't already have them enabled. So first off, what is the purpose of a DMARC report? Throughout the video, obviously I'm going to assume you're already somewhat familiar with DMARC. If not, there should be videos all over the place that talk about DMARC. But DMARC reports. The purpose of these reports is to benefit the domain owner. So obviously if you own a domain and you're sending email from that domain, you are the domain owner, and DMARC reports give you insight into how your DMARC rollout is going. Specifically, it tells you the authentication status of the different DMARC protocols, or the protocols that DMARC relies on, specifically SPF and DKIM. And it'll also talk about ARC and other policy exceptions, but really you're getting feedback on your SPF and your DKIM and your DMARC for all the different IP addresses that are sending email on your behalf. And so what you can do with this is you use this to tune and build out your policy. Otherwise, you wouldn't get feedback if an email failed to send. For example, if you had a new third-party service that was sending email using your domain, if it failed DMARC and your DMARC was in reject, the email would just fail to send, and you would have no way of knowing that this service was broken, except that the email wouldn't send, and eventually maybe someone internal to your company would be like, hey, I'm sending emails to customers, and none of them are being delivered. But that's not how you want to figure stuff out. Ideally, you could get notified, and this is the point of DMARC reports, is just to give you that information so that you can make sure your policy is running smoothly. And what you do is you normally, there's many different ways you can use these reports, but normally you take these reports, you aggregate them. We'll talk about what the contents of the reports look like in a second, but you aggregate them together, and you can either create dashboards yourselves or use a vendor, and they'll kind of show you that, hey, my SPF is passing at like 78%, and my DKIM is passing at 78% for my domain conrad.io. Maybe I should go investigate and make sure that all my services are sending correctly, or maybe it's just the case that I'm getting a lot of spam from this service, and people are trying to impersonate my domain. So using the information, you can kind of ask questions about, like I said, the status of how things are going. The specifications for the DMARC reports, you can always read them in the RFC. I linked it below. I'll put it in the description too if you want more details, but the rest of the video is just going to cover what these reports look like. Let's talk about how the reports are generated and who's actually generating these reports and who's sending them. So if we take a step back and we kind of look at the email authentication dance, we have a bunch of senders. So you have a domain like company.com. You're using a bunch of different services that send email as company.com. And so, this could be your Outlook, your Gmail, maybe you're using third-party services that send email. They're going to send an email. And again, email is just SMTP. It's just going to be a text-based protocol. It looks something kind of similar to this. They are going to open up a TCP TLS connection to the email receiver. So now if you're emailing someone at gmail.com, you're going to connect to gmail.com SMTP servers, and they are going to accept that email contents. And what they will see is a source IP address. And they will also see who you're trying to send the email as, the from address. There's multiple from addresses. We're going to skip some of the technical details because it's not necessary for this, but they're going to see that from address and your IP address. It's cool. Using that, they can start doing the DMARC dance. And from there, they're going to validate the SPF and the DKIM, and they're going to be checking your DNS records to see, what you've specified for that domain. So in this case, the email is from acme.com. So the email receiver, this could be, if you're emailing a Google person, a Microsoft person, a Yahoo person, they're going to be doing DNS lookups on _DMARC to see what DMARC record you currently have installed. We can see for this, fake example, they are set to reject, and they have this RUA set, this reporting aggregation address set, which we'll talk about later. This is actually how you set up DMARC reports. They'll see that you have a domain key, DKIM key here for Google, and they'll see that you also have an SPF setup. What's going to happen is these email receivers, so they're receiving a bunch of emails from a bunch of different IP addresses saying that they are authorized to send email from a bunch of different domains. They're going to aggregate all of this information per domain, and technically they're going to bucket on IP addresses, which we'll talk about in a second, but for each domain, every 24 hours, they're going to send out an email to whoever you specified here with the status of which emails from which source have passed or failed the different SPF, DKIM, and DMARC. And then there's also policy exceptions. And so, which is pretty cool. It used to be in other reporting services like content security policy, you get a failure report per violation, which is amounts to a crazy amount of volume. But in DMARC, it's nice that the email receivers actually aggregate it for us, and then once every 24 hours, they just send you, the compiled statistics of what happened. So as a domain owner, if you owned acme.com, you would probably receive, depending on how much email you send to your customers and the different providers your customers use, maybe you'll receive 5 or 10 emails a day that have the 24-hour aggregation of all the emails that were sent. Cool. So these are the things. And so now we can talk about what is in a DMARC report. So these DMARC reports, like I said, they get emailed to the email address you specify, and they are an XML document. The XML document follows this kind of form. I took a bunch of data out, and we're going to kind of zoom into each section, but it starts out with, the XML header tag. Everything is in the feedback, the version we don't care about. And then there's the three main sections are report metadata, the policy published, and the individual records. There will be multiple record rows, and they each contain information, usually segmented based off of IP address, the source IP address. Cool. So let's take a look at the first section. The first section was that report metadata. So this is from the email receiver. So this is, Google, the aggregator. Google is going to aggregate a bunch of data, and then they send you that final email once every 24 hours with, all the statistics. And so we can see this is a real one from Google for, I think we're looking at Casper.io. So Google is saying that, it's from Google. This is the date range. So this should be 24 hours. It gives us a report ID in case multiple are sent, and some of the vendors sometimes do send multiple for some reason. I'm not too sure why they do that. And yeah, I guess there's contact information if you have questions. We don't really use much in here. Just you grab the org name and maybe the date range. The policy published is the DMARC record that Google saw, and that they're evaluating against. This could be useful information too. Like if you changed your policy, maybe Google hasn't seen the updated policy. They probably have their own caching mechanism. And so maybe you'll get some confusing data, and you can see later that they're using an old version, and you might have to wait a couple of days before, they move to whatever your changes are. So it's useful to know what they're comparing against. Maybe it could also be if you had like a split brain DNS or something, it could also be useful to see like what they're evaluating against if, you have multiple DNS records that are evaluating differently, which is an issue I saw with a company a while ago. And so we can see, so this was Casper. We can see that I am set to policy reject. We can see this is the policy down here. It's set to reject. I have an RUA, which is how it was able to find me. We can see I'm using relaxed alignment for both DKIM and SPF, which is the default because I didn't specify one. And percentage is 100. So it all kind of aligns up. The actual meat of the report lives in the individual records. So there will be multiple of these records in the XML. And so this is the actual useful information. So we can see that within the row, it has the source IP. So when you're sending email, or when a provider is sending an email, obviously they're going to open up a TCP connection, and that TCP connection is going to have the source IP. From the source IP, you could do a reverse DNS lookup to see who sent it. And we can see in this case, the sender was Mailgun. And so this is useful information. We can see that Mailgun sent 3 emails from this IP address, claiming to have permissions to send emails from Casper.io. We can see that the policy was evaluated. The disposition was none, which is good. That's what we want. That means the email was successfully sent. We can see that it passed both DKIM and SPF. So everything was good with this one. Identifiers, not everyone sends these, but we can see in this case, the header from was .m.casper.io, which is useful information. It wasn't Casper.io, it was m.casper.io. Then we can see the individual auth results. This is useful for understanding what SPF they used and what DKIM selector they used. For DKIM, we can see that they used m.casper.io, and specifically they used the PIC selector. So the selector is the domain entry on the DNS that tells you which domain key that you're using. And so since they were using the PIC selector, we can look up what the value is. We do dig, it's a text record, and it's PIC, then the domain key .m.casper.io, and we can see here is the domain key for Mailgun. And then for SPF, they're just using the SPF that existed on m.casper.io, and we can see that here. It is just v equals SPF1, include Mailgun, and we're all set. Cool. So those are the XML reports. As a domain owner, what should you do with them? Either build or buy a dashboard. You can build it yourself, which is a fun project. You can also, there's plenty of SaaSes, DMARC Defender included, that do it for you for pretty cheap. But again, it is a fun project. And if you have the time and money or AI credits, it's fun to do. And then what you're going to do with these is you're going to aggregate them and start to understand potentially which services are not correctly authenticated. So for example, maybe you set up AWS SES to send email and it's doing SPF correctly, but you didn't do the custom return from, and so the DKIMs are not set up correctly. And so using this, you'd be able to see that, oh, email sent from SES, doing that reverse DNS lookup, you'll see that it's SES. The DKIM is incorrectly and you need to go configure that, or you should go configure that. Other things you're going to be looking for is ideally you would have a chart over time. Again, all the major providers do this, but if you're doing it yourself, a chart over time, and you can look for failure spikes. And specifically, like if a new service is added or maybe someone accidentally deletes a DNS record, it's useful to know that, email is no longer being sent, specifically if your policy is in reject mode. Hey, email is no longer being sent, and we need to, immediately fix it because customers should be getting emails and they're not getting emails. Cool. If you want to set it up, again, it's very simple. It's free. Highly recommend, even if you're not going to look at the reports now, just to set it up and send it to, a separate email address so that you can start debugging issues in the future if an issue does arise. But really, you're just going to be adding that RUA tag onto your DMARC. So ideally, you already have a DMARC record. If you don't, there's plenty of guides online. Actually, first, you should probably check to see if you already have DMARC if you're not sure. Doing that, you can use any of the domain tools online. I'll put a link for this one below, but you just type in your domain here. You can do check domain, and it'll tell you what your policy currently is. So you can see for Casper.io, the one we've been looking at, you can see here's the DMARC record. You can go and look at all the description and stuff, and it'll also tell you what, the rest of your everything else on your domain. But first, check to see what you already have. Maybe you already have reporting enabled. If you already have DMARC enabled and you don't have reporting, all you're going to do is add that RUA tag and then just do mail to, and then put a email address that you would like to receive these reports at. Like I said, it's just going to be an XML attachment, and then from there you can download and start poking to them. There's also a bunch of tools. I'll put one in the description. You can just upload that XML2 up into a web form, and it'll actually analyze it for you. You have to do it manually, upload the documents, but that's another way to get some insight if you just need one-off insight. And that's pretty much it. So in conclusion, these DMARC reports are great. They help you, the policy owner, tune your policy, understand where the failures are, authentication issues, all that stuff. Again, it's free. It's just these little XML documents, and they are aggregated and sent by the email receiving server. As the end sales pitch, if you don't want to build a dashboard yourself, DMARC Defender, we are a third party. Instead of putting your email address in that RUA tag, we help you set up, and we'll put our email address in there, which is just an API endpoint, and we'll collect that XML and we'll aggregate it, and we'll show you the charts and set up alerting, handle all the parsing and aggregation, all that stuff for you for a very affordable price. So if you need one, check us out. Otherwise, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a question below. Happy to answer it, or you can email me at stuart@dmarcdefender.io. Always happy to chat, and thanks for watching.